Hello and welcome to Afternoon Equality. My name is Christy, and today I'm talking to Nicole Robertson, who is the founder of Swap Society, which is an online clothing swap platform. I'm very excited to talk to her. As some of you know, my original intent for this show was to actually talk about sustainable fashion and share stories of people who are actively trying to adjust the narrative of the fashion industry and overconsumption and ethics and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to share this with you. Yeah, let's get right into it. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm really good. I'm really good. This is super exciting because I think we sort of talked about it on our initial call, but I actually also worked in sustainable fashion for a very long time, and so I'm really excited to kind of bring this show back to my roots. It feels like almost. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I intended. So yeah.
I love connecting with other people that are excited about sustainable fashion. I think there's so many great conversations that we can have. And I was so excited to meet you. It's such a pleasure. And we're kind of all, we're in the same town. So,
Yeah, or like we're almost neighbors. I like if this was maybe like what 3, 4 years ago, we would have been neighbors actually, because you actually live in the same area that I still live in.
oh, how funny.
Yeah. But anyways, how did you find yourself in the sustainable space? And how did you get to fashion and wanting to take on sustainable fashion? Because it's not an easy feat. Like I know that, like firsthand.
Well, it's still a little bit of the Wild West, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sustainable fashion is still kind of this very new thing. Well, I've been on kind of an interesting path personally. It hasn't been very linear. I used to sing professionally and dance professionally, and I was always performing. And I became a makeup artist, and so I would, I would do makeup and also dance and also sing, and I just had this crazy schedule, but it all worked out. It was really fun. And over time, I started working more and more on the corporate side of the beauty industry. And, but personally, I've always been really passionate about sustainability. When veggie cars became a thing, like old diesel Mercedes converted to run on veggie oil, I was kind of obsessed.
Oh
I
yeah,
thought
I
they
was
were
like
so
veggie
fun.
carbs, like
Before electric cars were a thing. I
right.
mean, I'm always trying to live as sustainably as possible. And it was around 2010 when I thought, well, how can I be even more sustainable? Took a deep dive into my personal consumption, really started thinking about, you know, how am I contributing and how can I be better? And I understand that, individual actions alone aren't going to solve the climate crisis, right? I mean, it's a really massive systemic problem. Um, that being said, I do believe that, our personal actions do play a role. And
Right.
so it was around 2010 when I learned that the fashion industry was so polluting. And then, of course, once you start learning about all of the horrible environmental aspects of the fashion industry, from, greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? It's just a very dirty industry. Then you start learning about all of the human rights abuses and how garment workers, aren't paid fairly and they work in horrible conditions. And, you start going down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And I just knew that I really didn't want to be a part of that. I should also add, being a person that was a makeup artist and working in beauty and also doing makeup for fashion shows, not just beauty brands, but also just being in that culture, being a performer, someone who was on stage all the time. I love fashion. I love using clothes and hair and makeup as a way to express myself or change my character up a little bit or whatever it may be. And so I did definitely have a little bit of what I think maybe some people would consider a shopping addiction. Um,
I mean, we all have a little bit of a shopping addiction, right? I mean, it's not that new.
um, I once had a friend tell me that I gave away more clothes than she owned. And I thought, wait, you don't have this much clothing? But I was cycling through things quickly. I loved thrifting. I loved the thrill of the hunt. I loved finding unique pieces that no one else had. I was really into that. But I also had, designer pieces that I splurged on, and I had some fast fashion. It wasn't called that back then, but I had some fast fashion, or maybe it was really technically pre-fast fashion, but you get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, yeah.
Mainstream brands where you don't really know, but it's inexpensive. And so my wardrobe was really a mix of high and low and vintage and thrift.
Mhm.
But then I thought, okay, well, I don't want to be a part of this cycle. I don't want to put my money toward an industry that's, doing really terrible things to the planet, especially since even though I enjoy it and it's part of my self-expression, it really is kind of superfluous, right? It's like, yes,
Right.
we need to wear clothes, but we don't need to have a ton of clothes. That's not
Right,
it's
yeah.
not a necessity like food, right? We all need to eat, we all need to drink water, etc.
Yeah.
So I stopped buying brand new clothes. I didn't say, oh, I'm never buying that stuff again. It wasn't, I wasn't like this instantaneous shopping ban per se, but it just really happened. I just started saying, okay, well, I'm just not going to be a part of that anymore. And I was looking for alternatives. I never liked those little shops. Now there are online versions as well, but those resale
Mhm.
shops where they hardly take any of your stuff and they give you very
Oh,
little
yeah.
money for your clothes, that never felt really good. And I didn't have time to sell my clothes or try to sell my clothes because, as I'm sure you know, a lot of it doesn't ever get sold. All of this like time and effort and photos and listing
Yep.
um and back then, there was eBay. I think that was kind of it at that point in time. But I didn't
Yeah,
have time to
Poshmark didn't
do that.
exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't have time to do that. And so I thought, well, maybe I could just swap the clothes that are in my closet with people in my neighborhood. I don't know. I just Googled clothing swap Los Angeles. I had no idea back then what a kind of moment that would be in the trajectory of kind of my life. And it took some time. It was a slow moving train, but basically there was, and LA. So for a few months, for 6 months, I lived in Playa del Rey. And in that moment happened to be when I did this little Google search, and there was a little swap shop in Playa del Rey, right
Oh,
in my
like an actual
neighborhood.
store?
Yeah, like a little brick and mortar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was on the second floor of like a coffee shop building or something. I don't know. It was just kind of
Okay.
a random thing. And I read their website and I looked at what their thing was. And I filled up a bunch of bags, with my clothes that I wasn't wearing anymore. And I brought them there and just showed up with like a massive, a massive haul of stuff and walked out with a new wardrobe. And I swapped with that group for years through 2 pregnancies. I gained 50 pounds each pregnancy. So I've been a lot of sizes on the way up and on the way down, and
Uh-huh.
on the way up and on the way down. And I didn't have to buy an entire new wardrobe. And so, it was really amazing and I really loved it. And then the woman who had originally started it had kids and didn't want to do it anymore, kind of passed it on to someone else. And then eventually she decided to close it down. She didn't want to do it anymore. And so I was super bummed.
Yeah.
I really was bummed because swapping became my favorite way to mix up my wardrobe. And
Mhm.
so I thought, well, and I've worked for beauty tech companies um and so, and my husband works in tech, and I just said, well, what if I started an online swap, because there are things that are called swaps sometimes, but it's really just resale, right? But like not a
Right.
true swap. We're a true swap. So I thought, okay, well, what if we created something that could reach more people than just 100 women on the west side of LA,
Mhm.
and something that could be scalable, something that was super fair, something that was accessible and affordable. And so that's when we started brainstorming all of these different ideas, and that's how I came to be in sustainable fashion. That was it.
That's amazing. And I think like I kind of want to dig into this a little bit where, this idea of swapping versus donating or thrifting. Like what would you say are the key benefits to that? Because obviously like this is how you originated Swap Society, like your company, which I'm super excited about, but I just want to like kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it. So let's talk a little bit about like swapping versus donating, because like when you talked about taking bags into this place, like it kind of like a lot of people do that, but they just take it to Goodwill.
Yeah. Well, the sad truth, the sad reality is that less than 20% of what we donate to thrift shops ever gets resold. Um, Part of it is a supply and demand issue, right? There's much more supply than demand. Part of it is a quality issue. There are a number of factors of why this is the case, but the bottom line is that when you drop off your bags of clothes at Goodwill, the majority of what you drop off is going to wind up in a landfill or incinerated, or
Mhm.
potentially packed up in bales and shipped to um, countries in the global south. A lot of our clothes wind up in Africa. There are a lot of resources and people, activists who kind of shed light on what we've done to those economies and those communities by dumping our clothes on them. But basically, we're basically just pushing our stuff on someone else. It's kind of like, I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm donating it to Goodwill. So
Right.
I'm helping someone with my discarded clothing, but that's actually, maybe on a on a certain scale. Uh, some thrift shops do, a lot of good work in their communities and help people. And it's not to discredit that at all. And I still think thrift shops are amazing. And I think we should all shop at thrift shops and buy things secondhand. But the problem is we're buying more and more clothing than ever before. So our consumption of clothing is on its way up, but clothing utilization is on its way down. So we're buying more clothes than ever. We're wearing them for a lot less than we used to.
Mhm.
And we're not, and some people say, oh, well, part of the problem is that, thrift shops are flooded with fast fashion. And I think that, if you're a reseller and you're looking for stuff to resell, obviously you're probably not going to go for the fast fashion garment because you're not going to have as big of a margin on that item. But even if those clothes are more simply made, a lot of luxury brands have similar practices and similar,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you know this too, and could shed some light on that even more than me, because I've actually never worked specifically for a fashion company, right? So
Right.
I'm not from the fashion industry per se, right? But it's I mean, it's a really complex situation, but a lot of luxury brands also use similar factories and manufacturing practices as fast fashion brands. And so, and even if fast fashion, maybe if it's made more simply, or maybe if they rely more heavily on polyester, although a lot of luxury brands use polyester too, that's
Yes.
a fabric that's really can last for hundreds of years. I mean, literally hundreds of years. So we should be wearing those garments. I feel very strongly that we should keep all wearable clothing in circulation for as long as possible. We should
Yeah.
not be throwing it in the trash. It takes so many resources to make the fiber, whether it's cotton or polyester, and you're extracting oil. No matter what the material is, it takes a lot of resources to make the fiber, make the garment, ship it around the world to wherever it winds up being sold. And it's just really, really sad that we're treating these things as these disposable items. And there's a stat from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's a few years old now, but so I don't know how exactly accurate it is today, but that every second a garbage truck of textiles is landfilled or incinerated.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I haven't heard that one. The stat that I usually share with people is like the first one is that which one? Oh, like so fast fashion, like talking about that, like most I think like 60% of fast fashion clothes either has like less than a year of life, like or like is thrown away within its first year of life, which is crazy, which means like 60% of what is being produced ends up going to a landfill by the end of that year.
It's crazy. And that
Which,
doesn't even get into like overproduction and,
right.
how much brands throw away, what winds up on the cutting room floor,
Yeah.
what happens to returns, going into
Yeah.
holiday season, or
Yeah.
the people that say, oh, I don't know what size I want. I'm going to order 3 sizes and try them all on. And that so many returns wind up landfilled or incinerated, or unsold material, unsold inventory gets burned because luxury brands don't want to devalue their brand. So,
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. No, like I've definitely I've talked to people who like used to work at like Forever 21, and they've talked about like just boxes and boxes of clothing that they never even put on the floor that they just send back, and they don't know what happens to it. They just send it back to wherever they got it from. Like they send it back to the distribution center, and they don't know what happens to it after that. And it's like it's all in all likelihood it's going to, Africa, it's going to an incinerator, it's going somewhere else where it's like it's somebody else's problem. Like, but then you start going into like, is it like out of sight out of mind, or like, what is this problem that we're creating in this overconsumption? And then like, just the whole idea of fast fashion is the key to fast fashion is to overproduce, because like the thing, like in order to stay relevant you have to stay trendy, and so you're producing whatever is like coming in and out of the mainstream constantly. Like I think they release collections monthly and or like bi-weekly almost, like some of them, which is
It's
crazy.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
There used to be, fall, winter, and spring, summer. Then it was like 4
Right.
seasons and plus resort. And now, yeah, sometimes it's 52 micro collections a year or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, no, I've worked for a whole gamut of companies. Like I've worked for companies that do 5 seasons a year. And then I've actually been at companies where they transition from like 5 seasons to 12 seasons. Like they have 12 deliveries, so they have a monthly delivery. And then I've also worked at a company where they did do that, like they did 52 micro collections. Like there was just always something being produced like constantly. And so, but again, like it's like you mentioned, like all those factories are technically the same. Like I've kind of worked with the same people throughout my entire career, and that spanned like 8 years, which
Yeah.
is yeah. And like it goes anywhere from like, Target to, mid-luxury brands that I've worked for. So yeah.
It's not actually glamorous, right?
Right. Like not as like the price tag is like you're really just paying for a name at that point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what label is sewn into that garment.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love the creativity of fashion designers.
Right.
I love seeing people that are well dressed or creatively dressed. Or I think, I think that I'm not alone in that, right?
Right.
Just gotten out of hand. It's just
Mhm.
gotten crazy. It's just gotten really crazy.
Yeah, well, and I mean, we haven't even really dug into like the ethics of it all, and the way the industry treats people. Because I think like this is the other stat that I usually share with people. And like this is from a long time ago too, but 1 in 6 people in the world works for the fashion industry in one way or another. Like
Mhm.
whether that is growing cotton, or working in a dye house, or spinning yarns, or designing, or pattern making, or sewing, or just selling on a retail floor. 1 in 6 people in the entire world works in the fashion industry. And
Yeah.
so like between all of those people, like you have human rights violations constantly happening. You have like, buildings full of people dying sometimes. Like it's horrific, some of the things that happen. But the fashion industry also has like such a hold on the economies. Like, and I say economies multiple because like, obviously China is a huge producer. Um, the fashion industry is largely responsible for like, rebuilding economies in places like um what am I thinking of? Like, a lot of like Southeast Asian countries like rely on the fashion industry like for their economies as well. So like, the fashion industry can both create and destroy in like in very large scales.
Mhm.
But that like, so then like when we talk about economies, like it is really referring to multiple people. It's not just like, it's not one place that's responsible for it, like, but it is one industry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a global problem.
Hmm.
Um, and there are a lot of people that talk about, the fashion industry's links to colonialism and the history of colonialism as well. And,
Hmm.
the silk trade, it's just, it's
Yeah.
really, I mean, there's so much that you can learn about and dive into. And you mentioned, how sometimes people have died in factories. I mean, obviously Rana Plaza was a big moment.
Yep.
I think where a lot of people started paying more attention. That was where, Fashion Revolution, the nonprofit, kind of came from.
Mm-hmm.
And we're active with, promoting, I don't know if promoting is the right word, but participating in Fashion Revolution Week, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
promoting, their messaging. We work with Remake. They're based here in the United States, in San Francisco area. So there are some different organizations that are trying to bring these problems to light and
Mm-hmm.
try to help make the fashion industry become more transparent.
Yeah.
And I think one of the cool things that's happening from these types of organizations is that they're rallying the public to put pressure on fashion companies.
Yeah.
And if fashion companies are all about branding and marketing and image. And so I think that, when you have large groups of people putting pressure on a brand's image, I think that that can be really powerful in terms of, effectuating change, and hopefully, you know,
Yeah.
helping to make things better. One thing that passed recently here in California, which we were supporters of, was SB 62, which was the Garment Worker Protection Act. And it was led largely by the Garment Worker Center, which is based here. And they really advocate for garment workers' rights. And it's really exciting that that step was made. It's by no means solves problems, but for anyone who's listening or watching and doesn't know, the average garment worker in Los Angeles
Mm-hmm.
make, has been making about a third of minimum wage because of the piece rate. And it's basically a way for, for people to get, basically subjugate these people. I mean, they work
Yeah.
really hard. They're human beings. They have families. They have feelings. They matter. And it's impossible to live on $5 an hour in Los Angeles. I just
Yeah.
put that out there, that it's, and so what's happening as a result of this is, um a really a huge shift in how clothes are manufactured in the United States. But as I'm sure you know, that's such a teeny tiny percentage
Right.
of clothing manufacturing. And so the work is certainly not done. But one of the things that really struck me was how many businesses were opposed to this legislation, right? And I even had a little, I try to avoid, fighting with people on the internet, but um, we
I
we
feel that.
I feel like, as far as, just like best practices, like avoid fighting with people on the internet. But there was somebody who was, talking about, on our Instagram page, how, all the bad things about SB 62, and why it's not a good thing. And the way that they phrased it, I said, so basically what you're saying is we should be okay paying these people slave wages because it's better for business.
Right. But also, like, I feel like a lot of people don't understand, like, a lot of people aren't privy to how, like, because you mentioned the piece rate, and a lot of people don't know what that means.
Mhm.
So, like, I mean, like, I don't know if you want me to explain or if you want to explain it,
Yeah,
but
no, go for it. You're more, you probably know more about it than I do. You'll probably give a more
also,
eloquent
I
response.
mean, like a piece rate means like, so saying like you have a t-shirt, a garment worker, like largely, and this happens all over the world, like they're largely paid by the number of pieces they produce per hour. And so say like, I mean, so here in LA, like I think they pay maybe like what 12 cents a piece, like so for like a t-shirt. So you get paid 12 cents a piece. And then like depending on how many of those shirts you make within an hour, that is your hourly rate. And so that's why like a lot of fast fashion relies on that, and that's why they produce so much, because they're like the workers are literally trying to sew as quickly as they can in order to raise that piece rate, in order to raise that hourly wage that they're getting,
Yeah.
which is crazy to like conceptualize, I feel, for a lot of people, because like your hourly rate is literally determined by how productive you are.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand to a certain extent, there are certain industries where maybe what you create is commensurate with like what you earn, but but these are people who have been taken advantage of, right? So
Right.
it's like, it's not in a fair way. And I think the majority of the people that live in the Western, in Western countries would never work that fast or that
Right.
hard and for so little money. I mean, and it's not the only industry that has these types of problems, right? I mean,
No, no, no,
talking
no.
specifically about fashion, but these are issues, you know, eh, food production is a big one. I mean, but it's not like these people are lazy people and so we have to put pressure on them to make sure that they produce enough
Right. No,
or
like
they're going
a
to
lot of
slack
these,
off, right? It's like
yeah, like a lot of these people have like, I mean, a lot of, I think that was, I don't know if this is part of the legislation as well, but like I know a lot of, this was a huge issue with American Apparel, like before they kind of had to rebrand and whatever, like a lot of their workers were illegal. They were, they didn't have documentation. A lot of them had their documentation withheld by the company, like, and so they're literally being held hostage for documentation, which is essentially indentured servitude, is what that is.
it's
But
insane. And their whole thing was
yeah,
sweatshop free, remember?
right, exactly.
So, which brings us to like, well, there's greenwashing. What's the word for, lying about how ethical your production is? I don't
Yeah,
know
I'm
the term, but it's yeah, no, it's really serious stuff. And I think that, the more people know about it, I think the thing that's also fascinating to me is a lot of people have no idea where their clothes come from, right? They never really
right.
think about what it takes to get a piece of clothing to them. And I think there's a stat that it's on average like 200 pairs of hands touch every garment before it gets to the consumer.
Yep.
Um, that's a lot of people. And then some people are like, wait, aren't clothes made by machines? It's like,
Like,
no.
like, I mean, like machines with people,
Yeah, like
like
people
they're people.
operating like a sewing machine
Yeah,
or
like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
there's a video going around that I've seen a few times where it's these women sitting in a row and they work in a sock factory and they're putting socks on the little sock cards and they're going so fast that I'm just like, oh my God, like it gives me a little bit of anxiety just to think
Yeah.
about what that life must be like, that you sit there and you do that repetitive motion nonstop all day as fast as you can. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. But anyway, let's get back to
sorry.
Swap
I know we
Society.
can like
I
go on
feel
all of these
like we
tangents.
got very deep into that rabbit hole.
Whew.
But I think it's also like the last point I wanted to make was because I know you at the top of the show you talked about individual consumption and how like like I feel like I've been seeing this a lot more recently, especially like because the COP26 or whatever just happened. But how like individual consumption, even if everybody in the world like changed how they do like their consumption, their sustainability, whatever, we would still not be able to reach any of the goals because like the largest 7 companies in the world still produce more emissions than the rest of the population combined. And like while that's true, I feel like the idea of individual consumption, while like collectively it might not make a difference, like the fact that that individual consumption means that everyone at least like is being educated and understands like the impact, and then they can take that to like that empowerment and that knowledge to ask for better from those companies and from those brands. Like that's how I've always seen it, or like that's at least how I'm seeing it now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we need to reduce our personal consumption. We need to think about not just clothing and how much clothing we're buying, but what we eat and um, you know, I mean, so many things, right? Not,
Yeah.
going into the holiday season, not buying a bunch of junk just because you feel like you have to, because it's the holidays and you feel pressure, like, oh, I'm supposed to buy all of this stuff. We've become such a consumeristic society and we've become so detached from the things that we consume, whatever that may be. All of those things really do matter. They do add up. It's not enough to solve the problem, but I think we need to change individual consumption in addition to putting pressure on these companies.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
and also similar to how we talked about earlier, how some organizations are getting, people to put pressure on fashion brands. We need to also put that type of pressure on other types of companies
Right.
as well. And money talks. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't buy that company's stuff, that's not going to work for them, right? So it's like it is, we are a part of it. We are
Yeah.
a part of this system. um
Right.
and so yeah, I think the cops are always, you know largely unproductive, right? That was the 26th one. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that being said, we can't give up, because it's literally, the fate. I mean, Earth will exist, right? I mean, will there be anything alive left on it? That I
Right.
don't know. Uh, you know, but is are humans going to survive? Or are we
Exactly.
going to become extinct? I mean, that's the actual crisis that we're facing
Mhm.
as human beings on this earth. And so I think that the more there's that kind of general consciousness shift amongst the masses of people that are in this world, the better. the,
Yeah.
the hard part is some people are just struggling to get by, right? Struggling to make ends meet, struggling to feed their families. And so a lot of people don't have the time or the energy to necessarily participate at a certain level. So I think
Mhm.
that people that do have a little bit more flexibility in their lifestyle should absolutely partake more, right? And
Yeah.
participate more. And the more we all have these types of conversations, the more awareness there is, the better.
Yeah.
I think I read the first page of a book and I didn't get very far, but it's on my phone. Wait, there was a quote. It's kind of on this topic and I saved it because I was like, oh, this is such a good quote. Um, it's a quote. Well, so the book is Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World.
Uh-huh.
And I'm really excited to read it, but I literally, like I said, I didn't read very much, but they start the book off with a quote and that's all I've read. So that's all I have to offer. But I saved it on my phone and it's, we don't have a right to ask whether we are going to succeed or not. The only question we have a right to ask is what's the right thing to do? What does this earth require of us if we want to continue to live on it?
I love that.
And so it's up
Yeah.
to all of us. We all need to participate in whatever way that we can, whether it's how we vote, contacting our elected officials if we live in a democracy,
Right?
um, using our social feeds to promote equality and fairness and ethical treatment of people and animals and planet. I think, yeah, we should just do as much as we can.
Yeah, well, just like really like kind of thinking more about the, bringing in more compassion and empathy into our lives.
Mhm.
Yeah. But so I wanted to get into we talked a little about economies and value and things like that. So um like going back to swapping, how do you make sure people are getting quality swaps? Because I feel like obviously like we talked about people having like less than or having access to a certain level of like fashion and luxury versus other people. So if both of those people are participating in the swaps, like how do you sort of maintain the idea like no one's losing value, or that things are not so like someone's trading it or like swapping in something that's really expensive or really high luxury, like how do you know that they're not only getting fast fashion back or vice versa?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And that was a really big part of how we developed our model. Understandably, if you buy sustainable and ethical fashion, it's going to cost more. When
Mhm.
you pay people fairly and you are really careful about your manufacturing processes and thinking about sustainability and your fibers, et cetera, all of, and your dyeing processes, I think that that costs more. And so that cuts a lot of people out of the equation. And so, and obviously the masses are buying lots and lots of fast fashion and they
Mhm.
continue to do so. Um, that being said, we really wanted people to feel like swapping was super fair. So whether you were a person that only had high-end items or you had a mix of things, like I think a lot of people do, or you just have fast fashion, that everyone is welcome to swap. We accept all brands and even clothes that are missing the tags. So I feel like it's really important to keep that wearable garment in circulation. If somebody cut the tag out because it's scratched or whatever the case might have been, it's
Right.
still a wearable garment. And so we created an alternative currency that gives multidimensional value to every garment. So it looks at a number of factors like original retail value and the, you know, the brand, but it also looks very heavily at condition. So we have many different levels of condition. So new with tags, like new, which doesn't happen very often, but sometimes we do get something where it's clear, okay, yes, this is absolutely, this has never been worn before, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can tell it's never been worn or washed. It's like, okay, it doesn't have the tag, but it's new. Most of what we get is what we consider gently used, which is, yeah, it's been worn, but it's still very wearable, still has life in it, in great shape. And then we have another tier that we added because we felt like we were turning down a lot of very wearable garments that had a minor imperfection. So maybe, you know, a shirt is missing a button. Well, that's really easy to replace, right? So it'll have a much lower SwapCoin value, but some people are fine with that. Or, oh, there's a little mark on the cuff or a tiny snag near the hem or whatever it might be. It's at our discretion. But we really try to keep garments going for as long as they can. But we also want to make sure that people feel excited about the stuff that they're getting. So if something's really worn out, super pilly, I mean, deodorant marks or underarm stains or anything gross like that, we're absolutely not going to take it. If there's a tiny moth hole in a sweater, okay, fine, imperfect. But if it has like 6 tiny moth holes, okay, that's too many. We're not going to take it, you know. So, but the value of every garment, because they're, and we also look at season. So there are a number of factors at play. So when people are, when our team lists things onto the site, they enter a number of data points, and our algorithm generates the SwapCoin value. So it's not arbitrary. We're not sitting around just kind of throwing numbers out there.
Yeah.
It's algorithmically determined. It ties into a big database that we've developed, and so it really keeps it super, super fair. So you really do get equal value out of the swap for what you send in a way that's different than, say, if you donate things to a thrift store, you don't get anything, right? You might get a tax credit or something for a donation,
Yeah.
depending on where you donate, potentially. But really, you're just kind of giving those things away, which I'm not opposed to people giving things away, but you don't get anything in return for that, obviously. If you sell at a resale shop or site, you'll probably get about 2 to 4% of the original retail value for the garment, which is something, but it's not a ton.
I mean, 2 to 4%, that's like
Yeah. And then those places, on average mark up about 10x. That's just like the formula, right? The
yeah.
resale formula. Some higher end brands, there's often a sliding scale. So, and if you do consignment, you can make more, but then you only make money if it sells. And, so there are all of these models out there that I partake in. I mean, I shop at some of these places, you know, also, whether it be a thrift store or an online platform or a consignment shop, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm really hardcore about getting everything that I can possibly get secondhand, and I'm also really patient. um, but all of that also takes time. So what we say is, we'll take all of those clothes. We take women's and kids. We'll take those clothes. We don't care what the season is. We'll take any season at any time, but you'll get a lower SwapCoin value. If you send us summery shorts right now, you're not going to get as many SwapCoin for that as if you
Mhm.
sent it in the summer and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But we'll take it, and we take it all. So we don't have a brand list of accepted brands, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Uh,
So then,
Go
oh
ahead.
wait, no, keep going.
Well, I was just going to also add, because I think part of your question was also a little bit about accessibility and like different socioeconomic levels.
Yeah.
And we are a member only platform. And so there is a small membership fee to be a member, but we cover shipping both ways. And also everything you order is SwapCoin plus $4.99. So we don't have any markups. So we've basically taken markups out of the equation. And so there's really no more affordable way to mix up your wardrobe other than like hosting your own swap with friends where you do all the work and it's free and
Mhm.
you just all hang out and have a glass of wine and share clothes. But we take all the work. We do it all. We steam it, we photograph it, we list it on the site, we warehouse the garments, we ship out the orders. So it's a lot less work than if you're trying to sell your clothes on Poshmark or something like that.
Yeah, which I love that. I think it's great. And I think it is like it is very accessible because like that, the 4.99 is that's a coffee. Like that's a fancy coffee.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
some people have asked, well, why do you have this per item fee instead of just like a bigger membership fee? But the thing is that we have some people that are light swappers,
Mhm.
they'll swap, every maybe once a quarter when they're freshening up their wardrobe, or some people that order a few things, like 5 to 7 things every month. But then we have people that constantly order 10, 20, 30 or more items. And so I didn't want to lock people in, like how rental often works, where it's like, pay this, pay $100 a month and get 4 things at a time or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Right.
Um, but but what about the people that want more? For
Mhm.
whatever reason it is. I wanted it to have that flexibility. So that's why we created the model the way that we did. And so those people that want to swap a lot more, they can absolutely do that, but they're just going to spend a little bit more to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that totally makes sense. I wanted to get into the like when you because you said that there is sort of like an evaluation that happens. What does happen with or what is that control process or that quality control process look like, and what happens to things that are unswappable?
Sure. Um, well, we look at everything before we photograph it. And, during the steaming process, we hand steam the garment. So, you see, that's when it's perfect time to kind of really inspect things and look for those imperfections. Um, and so, and sometimes maybe an imperfection gets missed right away, but then it gets caught, at the point when it's getting listed or what have you. I mean, it's so yeah, so that's basically it. I mean, we just have people that are just really looking at, you know, the entire garment and checking
Mhm,
for any issues. What do we do with the stuff that we don't accept? So there are a couple main ways that we deal with those garments. And I should mention that it's rare that we get something that's just awful. I mean, it does happen once in a while where it's like,
mhm.
why did someone send us this? I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, please, in my mind, we're all just like, please don't send us stuff like this. Um, but and I'm talking big stains or holes or where it's just like clearly nobody's gonna want that or wear that.
Yeah.
So we always try to encourage people to think about, would you be excited if you received this garment? I think that sometimes people know that we are responsible about how we pass things on. So I think that sometimes means that people send us all the stuff,
Mhm,
which is not really ideal. But that being said, we work with some charities that will pass the clothes on to people who can utilize the clothing. We also work with different fashion designers that are here in Los Angeles who will upcycle garments. So let's say we get a silk blouse with underarm stains, they'll cut that part of the fabric away and they'll repurpose the fabric into a new garment. We're still at a small scale. Our goal is to scale, but we're not there at this point yet. So, we're still at a place where we know the people that we're passing these things on to, and we kind of know where they're all going, and we don't throw anything away. That being said, as we scale, we're going to need more sophisticated processes for, you know, dealing with those garments.
mhm. Okay, but I think I really appreciate that you guys are still that you have avenues to and like to promote the sort of like circular economy where you're like, even though like if there are things that do come to you at the end of their life, like it, you're not just throwing it into a landfill and doing, what you're trying to save things from, right? Like you're
Yeah,
actually putting it somewhere where it can still be useful. Like there are other ways to do it. So I think I really like I really respect and appreciate that.
thank you.
Yeah. So, like this was amazing, and I think like, and I don't want to keep you any longer because I know it's a Monday. But how do people find you, and how do they start swapping?
Sure. So we serve the whole USA. So if you live within the United States, we can service you, and it's swapsociety.co. So swapsociety.co is our website, and you can find us on Instagram at swapsociety. Yeah, we're on all the platforms, but Instagrams are the one we, spend the
I love it.
most time on
Yeah, yeah,
at
I
this
feel that.
point.
I feel that. Awesome.
On
Well,
Facebook, we're it's at We Are Swap Society. But if you head over to our website, swapsociety.co, you can find all the platforms. And
okay, yeah, I can have links for all that too in the
okay,
show
cool.
notes, so that'll make it easier. But this was amazing. Thank you so much. I love going down this like sustainable rabbit hole with you. Like this was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. I was so happy to meet you and have this chat. And yeah, we'll absolutely keep in touch.
Yeah, this is great. So yeah, thank you so much. And I can't wait to start swapping.
Yay!
Yay!
Bye.
Thank you so much to Nicole for coming by and chatting. As you saw, like we kind of went down a little rabbit hole, but I'm so excited to have found someone who is just as passionate about sustainable fashion and who is actively trying to adjust that narrative. Again, you can find her at swapsociety.co or on Instagram at swapsociety, and I will have those links for you in the show notes and also just on my social media pages to help promote it. Yeah, like perhaps for the holiday season, this is something to consider. Like instead of just going out and buying a bunch of new things, like maybe swap a couple things. I know my wardrobe is way too full right now, and so I'm definitely going to be taking advantage of it. I also wanted to address, I think in the midst of going down that rabbit hole and speaking, I kind of went a little quickly and I referred to some people as illegal, and I did not mean to do that. I did mean undocumented, and I hope I caught myself and I self-corrected, but I will definitely try to be more aware of that down the line. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me again and being so open and welcoming to these kinds of conversations. I'm really excited to go into this holiday season with all of you, and yeah, thank you so much. Cheers.